The day before my wedding, I was kidnapped. My eyes were blindfolded, but I could smell the sharp scent of fresh roses mixed with the salty tang of the ocean breeze. I knew this smell. It was the coastal estate where I was supposed to get married tomorrow. As a top-tier private investigator, I quickly ran through every client and enemy I had ever made in my head. I couldn't think of anyone who would do this. The captor didn't just torture me. They used a voice changer to ask me incredibly bizarre questions. Can you describe, in detail, what it feels like to be touched right now? If you had to choose again, would you prefer an ice bath or a boiling sauna? Do you think the kidnapping from 10 years ago was more fun, or is this one better? The mention of 10 years ago triggered a massive panic attack. I shook so hard I couldn't breathe, let alone speak. But as I struggled, my hand accidentally brushed against the rope tied behind my back. My fingers traced the knot. It was a very specific, unique knot. One that I had invented myself. I had never taught it to anyone. Except for one person. My fiancé, Ethan. Cut. Let's wrap it up for today. Amber is getting hungry. My blindfold was violently ripped off. The estate hall was filled with cameras and crew members. And there they were, sitting behind the monitors, my fiancé, Ethan, and Amber. I felt like my soul had been sucked out. Even though the ropes were undone, I sat frozen in the chair, unable to move. Ethan looked at Amber with absolute adoration, then turned to me with a casual smile. Chloe, you know Amber is a sociology major. Her senior thesis is about the real-time psychological reactions of kidnapped victims. You have past experience with this, so you were the perfect fit. Plus, our wedding is tomorrow, so I figured this was a good chance to bring you over and get you familiar with the venue. Amber turned off her voice changer, bouncing over from behind him. Chloe, thank you so much. My thesis is saved. Your crying and begging face just now was so incredibly realistic. The memories of when I was 18 rushed back like a tidal wave. Back then, I had cried and begged just like this. Actually, it was much worse. My body was still shivering from being drenched in ice water. I clenched my teeth, trying to stop them from chattering, and stared at Ethan. So, for the sake of our college project, you were willing to drag me back to hell? A flicker of guilt crossed his eyes. He quickly draped a dry towel over my shoulders and handed me a mug of hot cocoa. I know it was hard on you today, but try to understand the pressure Amber is under to graduate. You're about to be my bride tomorrow. Just think of it as helping out a little sister. Amber chimed in with a sweet, pouty voice. Chloe, the person who touched your leg just now was actually a female crew member. We just had a professional male voice actor speak near your ear. Please don't be mad at Ethan. And besides, when you were kidnapped back then, didn't Ethan risk his life to save you? Ethan is the hottest luxury designer right now. It's fine if you don't wear his designs, but you don't have to keep picking fights with him. Looking at my cold, expressionless face, the guilt in Ethan's eyes faded, replaced by annoyance. He snatched the hot cocoa I hadn't touched and threw it into the trash can. Ethan, I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Do you honestly think we still need to get married tomorrow? He frowned, looking down at me. Chloe, don't be so dramatic. Didn't you practically force me into this proposal anyway? Enough is enough. Amber's blood sugar is dropping. Go home by yourself. He tossed my phone onto the table and led the entire crew out. The massive estate was suddenly dead quiet. I was left all alone. Then, I noticed a laptop left open on the table.
He walked over.
On the screen was a document titled, Chloe's Kidnapping Simulation Details. Keep the temperature at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. She is extremely sensitive to the cold. The voice actor's voice must be disgusting and raspy. That is her biggest trigger. Use a hand model with rough skin to touch her, to make it feel real. I stared at the screen for a long time. Tears finally spilled over my cheeks. 10 years ago, Ethan and I were 18. My father, Arthur, who was also a detective back then, had pissed off a dangerous man named Marcus. Marcus kidnapped me. I was missing for 3 days and 3 nights, and no one could find me. It was Ethan, who I knew from my part-time job, who found me. He had climbed over the wall into the freezer of an abandoned food factory. While waiting for rescue, he wrapped all of his clothes around me. It was below zero. His eyelashes were covered in frost. I was hallucinating, hearing Marcus's disgusting, raspy voice in my ears. Ethan gently sang to me. His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely get the words out. When Marcus returned, Ethan hid me. Ethan was whipped with a saltwater-drenched lash until his back was raw and bleeding, but he never gave up my location. The memory of the bloody wounds on Ethan's back slowly merged with the Chloe's kidnapping simulation details on the screen. Since we had survived life and death together, of course he knew exactly where to stab me to make me bleed the most. I picked up my phone from the floor and dialed a number. Dad, cancel the wedding tomorrow. The moment the words left my mouth, my phone died. Feeling utterly humiliated, I began the long walk back to the city. The long dress I was wearing had been shredded into a mini-skirt by the kidnappers, and the neckline was ripped low. I suddenly remembered the dress. It was the one Ethan gave me the year he won his first major design award. Back then, he skyrocketed to fame with a bold, avant-garde little black dress. That exclusive dress, which countless girls dreamed of, was custom-made for me. But the moment I put it on, I couldn't stop thinking about the torn clothes Marcus had forced me to wear during those 3 days. So I had only worn it 3 times. I felt guilty for wasting his hard work, but he had smiled and told me, "If you don't like it, then it's not a good dress. I'll work harder to design something Chloe actually wants to wear." But now, every new seasonal piece he designed was worn by Amber before it even hit the runway. After walking for 3 hours, I finally made it back to my apartment complex. Suddenly, a heavy, greasy hand clapped down on my shoulder. I whipped around, cold with fear, and pushed his hand away. A heavy-set man smiled, revealing a row of yellow teeth. "How much for a night?" "What?" I asked. "How much? You're wearing that trashy, ripped dress. Who are you trying to play innocent for?" I didn't answer. I clutched my torn collar tightly and ran. The man yelled after me, "Bitch," dressing like a whore and pretending to be pure. I ran up the stairs and pushed open my door. Ethan was there, wearing an apron, roasting the herb chicken I loved. He acted as if today's kidnapping had never happened. His tone was perfectly casual. "Go wash your hands. Dinner's ready." Looking at the beautiful spread of food, I felt a wave of nausea. People always said Ethan's hands were worth millions because they designed the most elegant dresses in the world. But nobody knew those same hands happily cooked for me at home. He set a bowl of soup in front of me. This was his way of apologizing. I brought the wedding dress back from the studio. I adjusted a few details. "Why don't you try it on later?" I turned my head to look at the gorgeous wedding dress hanging in the living room. He had designed it before he was even famous. Once, a luxury brand offered him $3 million for the design. Ethan was broke back then, but he rejected the offer without a second thought. He had knelt before me with a sketch and said, "What are fame and fortune compared to you? Marrying you is my ultimate jackpot." When did we start to drift apart? It seemed to start when Amber joined his studio as a fit model. Ethan started forgetting my preferences. He began criticizing my conservative style. And he grew to despise my job as an investigator. The steam from the soup stung my eyes. Treating this as our final meal, I forced myself to finish the bowl. After dinner, Ethan drew a warm bath for me. I hesitated for a few minutes before finally putting on the wedding dress. The way he looked at me was still intense and passionate. But I knew he wasn't the same Ethan who had knelt on one knee and told me marrying me was his ultimate jackpot. He brought out a strawberry cake from behind his back. "Happy birthday, Chloe. And happy 10th anniversary." Under the candlelight, his eyes were mesmerizing. For a split second, I found myself wishing we could just start over. The next second, Amber's custom ringtone broke the silence. Ethan answered it right in front of me, his expression instantly changing to one of concern. I don't know what she said, but he hurriedly grabbed his car keys. The candles weren't even blown out yet, and wax began dripping onto the cake. It was a perfect metaphor for my life. Ethan said as he put on his shoes, "Amber's power went out, and she's terrified of the dark. I'll go over, change the light bulb, and come right back. Eat the cake without me." I calmly took off the gorgeous wedding dress and hung it back up, exactly where it had been. Then I pulled out my suitcase and packed every single thing I owned. Just as I was zipping it shut, Ethan called. "Amber has a fever. I have to stay and take care of her. Tomorrow's wedding, let's postpone it. Otherwise, Amber won't be able to make it."
I didn't yell.
I didn't scream. I just said, "Okay." There was a pause on the other line, sounding confused. "You're not mad this time?" I placed my house key on the coffee table. My voice was dead calm. "There's nothing to be mad about." He breathed a sigh of relief.
"Great.
"Don't get upset if you see some videos online. I promise I'll give you an unforgettable wedding next month to make up for it." After we hung up, I went online and found the video he was talking about. It was the footage from the kidnapping. In the sauna, I was heat-stroked and vomiting bile. They tore my dress, while a voice actor whispered disgusting lines in my ear. The cleaning lady's rough hand was on my thigh, pretending to be a man's. I was having a breakdown, kneeling and begging on the floor. And there was Ethan, holding Amber's shoulder, sipping champagne as they watched. Halfway through the video, I ran to the bathroom and threw up my entire dinner. Ignoring my aching body, I dragged my suitcase out into the night. I had just hailed a cab when a sharp, stabbing pain in my abdomen made the world spin. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. The doctor looked at me with a sympathetic sigh. "I'm so sorry, but you were 7 weeks pregnant. We couldn't save the baby." I stared blankly at the foredrip, unable to shed a single tear. The Good Samaritan who had brought me in had used my phone to call Ethan. Soon, Ethan and Amber appeared in the ER. Ethan looked incredibly annoyed. "Chloe, I actually believed you were going to behave tonight. It's the middle of the night, and Amber has a fever, yet she insisted on coming to see you. What is it this time?" My hand rested on my empty stomach. "Ethan R." Amber looked pale, leaning heavily against Ethan. "Chloe, there's a terrible flu going around. Look at how crowded the ER is. People are literally waiting in the hallways for a bed. It's not right for you to occupy a bed when you're perfectly fine. I know you're mad that Ethan was with me. Cough, cough. But I didn't want to get sick. It's all my fault." The ER was indeed packed, and patients were starting to look over at us with angry glares. "What is wrong with her? Take your domestic drama home. We're actually sick here. She looks so young. How can she be so selfish? If you can't keep your man, don't take it out on hospital patients. Get out." Ethan quickly apologized to the crowd. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My fiancé is just being immature. I'll take her home right now and free up the bed." He grabbed my arm and ripped the 4 needles straight out of my skin. As blood welled up on the back of my hand, I actually felt relieved. Relieved that my baby would never have to open its eyes to this world. Otherwise, they would grow up and blame me for choosing such a monster of a father. Outside the hospital, Ethan shoved me into his car. "Chloe, Amber's thesis deadline is tomorrow, and there are still a few shots missing. You need to come back to the estate and do a quick interview video." The car doors clicked, locking me in. I banged on the window. "No, I'm not doing it. Let me out." Amber wiped a tear. "If Chloe doesn't want to, let's not force her. It's fine if I fail. The worst that happens is I don't graduate." Ethan unlocked the doors, his voice cold as ice. "Fine, Chloe. You can leave. But don't expect me to introduce the heart surgeon for your grandmother anymore." The top heart specialist in the country was someone only Ethan's high society connections could reach. I let out a bitter laugh and stopped resisting. At the estate, the wedding decorations were halfway set up. The pearl satin drapes and the iris rose archway that I had once loved now felt like a sick joke. Ethan tied me to the chair again and turned on the camera. Amber walked up, a microphone in her hand. 10 years ago, when you were kidnapped, didn't you feel a tiny bit of excitement? A little thrill? That man only played with you for 3 days. Don't you think it's unfair that he had to go to prison for so many years? Maybe he just liked you too much and couldn't help himself. Why didn't you give him a chance?" Amber's words sliced right into my deepest trauma. Ethan didn't seem to find anything wrong with her questions. He was busy slicing fresh fruit for her nearby. Suddenly, his phone rang. After a quick call, he turned to Amber excitedly. "Amber, I finally got a lead on my mother's case. I have to go check it out right now. I'll be back to pick you up soon." Ethan had always believed his mother was murdered by his father's business rivals, and he had been searching for the truth for years. But Arthur's agency had recently discovered the truth. Ethan's mother had committed suicide after years of horrific domestic abuse by Ethan's father. I was still trying to figure out how to break the news to him gently. Once Ethan left, Amber walked over and shut off the camera. She pulled on a pair of latex gloves and drew a surgical scalpel from her bag. "You know how Ethan's mother really died, don't you? Too bad he doesn't. I told him that your detective father leaked his mother's location to her abusers. And the idiot actually believed me. Ha ha ha." So that was why Ethan's attitude toward me had completely flipped. A decade of love was completely destroyed by a single lie from a stranger. I stared at Amber's twisted, smiling face. Suddenly, her face overlapped with the face of the monster from 10 years ago. "Amber." Every single pore on my body screamed in terror. You're Marcus's daughter?" Amber slapped me hard across the face, her nails leaving bloody scratches on my cheek. "Chloe, you put my father in prison for 10 years, and you're only realizing who I am now. Too slow." This year was the 10th year. At the other end of the estate hall, the heavy oak doors slowly creaked open. A set of heavy, dragging footsteps echoed through the room, the exact sound from my nightmares. I was tied to the chair, my pupils dilating in pure horror. I watched Marcus walk out of the shadows, step by step. He looked like a demon crawling out of hell, his face covered in scars and fat. He pinched my chin, his greasy breath hot on my face. "Chloe, baby, it's been so long. You've grown up so beautiful." The terror of the past and the present crashed over me, shattering my sanity. I shut my eyes, praying that death would take me quickly. Amber handed the scalpel and a cheap, revealing dress to Marcus. Dad, I'll leave the rest to you. I'm going to call Ethan and make sure he doesn't come back here. Once Amber left, Marcus began unbuttoning his shirt. Chloe, look at this pretty dress I bought for you. Let's put it on and then we can play. You have to be a good girl, just like before. So, this is where you were going to get married? How exciting. Tomorrow, I'm going to hang you high from the ceiling in this dress, so your detective daddy can get a great view of his precious daughter. Ha ha ha. Marcus reached for my collar. I closed my eyes in absolute despair. The greasy touch of his hands on my skin made me want to die. Right when I was about to give up, the heavy doors of the estate were kicked open with a thunderous crash. Chloe. The voice was ragged, desperate, and stripped of the cold arrogance it had carried just hours before. It was Ethan. He stood in the doorway, his expensive bespoke suit drenched in rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was panting heavily, clutching a thick manila folder in his trembling hand. But as his eyes swept across the dimly lit hall, the frantic anger on his face instantly froze into sheer, unadulterated terror. He saw the ropes. He saw the cheap, revealing dress discarded on the floor. And, most of all, he saw the man standing over me. Marcus turned around slowly, a mocking grin spreading across his scarred, bloated face. Well, well, if it isn't the little designer boy. You've grown up, Ethan. But you still look just as weak as you did in that freezer 10 years ago. Ethan's eyes widened. The color drained from his face until he was as white as a sheet. The memories of the brutal whipping, the salt water-drenched lash, and the agonizing cold of his youth seemed to flash behind his eyes. Marcus. Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. He took a hesitant step forward, his gaze shifting wildly between Marcus and the ropes binding me to the chair. What is this? Why are you here? You're supposed to be in prison. My father got out 3 days ago, Ethan. Amber's sweet, pouty voice echoed from the side of the stage. She walked out of the shadows, her latex gloves gleaming under the spotlights. The innocent, fragile look she had worn for months was entirely gone. In its place was a cold, venomous sneer. And we have you to thank for setting the perfect stage. Ethan stared at her, utterly bewildered. Amber, what are you talking about? What is going on here? You really are an idiot, aren't you? Amber laughed, a shrill, grating sound that echoed through the empty hall. Did you actually believe your little sister was just a sociology major who needed a thesis project? Did you really believe that Arthur leaked your mother's location? She stepped closer to Marcus, resting her hand familiarly on the scarred man's shoulder. My father is Marcus. 10 years ago, Arthur put him away and ruined our family. I swore I would make him pay. And the easiest way to destroy a detective is to destroy his daughter. But I needed a way to get close to Chloe. I needed to know her weaknesses, her fears, her triggers. And who better to give them to me than her adoring fiancé? Amber gestured to the open laptop on the table. You wrote down every single one of her traumas for me, Ethan. The cold, the raspy voice, the rough hands. You helped me choreograph her living nightmare. You even let me use your state-of-the-art studio and your precious estate to do it. Ethan's chest heaved. He looked down at the folder in his hand, the official police records of his mother's suicide, which my father's agency had finally delivered to him. The records clearly detailed the horrific domestic abuse his father had inflicted on his mother, proving that Arthur had never betrayed anyone. He had spent years hating the wrong person, guided by Amber's whispers. You lied to me. Ethan choked out, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and mounting horror. You made me hate Arthur. You made me hurt Chloe. I did. All of that to her, because of you. Oh, don't act so righteous now, Amber sneered, tossing her head back. You did it because you're selfish. You liked the attention I gave you. You liked feeling like a savior to a young, pretty girl while your fiancé was too busy working to stroke your ego. And speaking of hurting her, Amber's eyes glinted with a sick, sadistic pleasure. She took a step toward Ethan, leaning in as if sharing a delicious secret. Did you know she was pregnant, Ethan? The world seemed to stop. The silence in the hall became deafening. Ethan froze, his eyes staring blankly at Amber. What? 7 weeks pregnant, Amber whispered loudly, her smile widening. When you dragged her out of the yard tonight, when you ripped that 4 needles straight out of her hand because you thought she was just being immature and jealous of my fake fever, she was actually miscarrying. She was bleeding out, Ethan. You Literally dragged her away from the doctors who were trying to save her. You killed your own child. Ethan dropped the manila folder. The paper scattered across the wet floor, quickly soaking up the rainwater. He turned his head slowly, agonizingly, to look at me. Our eyes met. My face was completely devoid of emotion. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at him with hollow, empty eyes. The silence of my gaze was more devastating than any accusation he could have ever faced. Chloe. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. He took a step toward me, his hands shaking violently. No. No, that's not true. Tell me she's lying. Chloe, please, our baby. She's not lying, Ethan. I said, my voice dead and flat. Our baby died. Tonight. And you made sure I couldn't even mourn in peace. A strangled, agonizing sob escaped Ethan's throat. He fell to his knees on the cold floor, his hands clutching his head. The weight of his actions, the realization of the absolute, monstrous cruelty he had inflicted on the woman he swore to protect, crushed him entirely. He looked like a man whose soul had been violently ripped from his body. I did that, he whispered, his tears dripping onto the scattered police files. I killed our baby. I did this to you. Enough of this family drama, Marcus roared, losing patience. He drew a heavy, rusted switchblade from his pocket, the metallic click echoing sharply in the quiet room. I didn't wait 10 years in a concrete cell to watch you weep. Amber, get the camera ready. Let's show Arthur what happens when you cross me. Marcus stepped toward me, his greasy fingers reaching for the collar of my torn dress. No, Ethan screamed. With a sudden burst of frantic, suicidal energy, Ethan threw himself forward. He tackled Marcus around the waist, knocking the larger man off balance. They crashed to the floor in a heap of limbs and curses. Chloe, run. Ethan yelled, his voice raw as he scrambled to pin Marcus down. Run. I'll hold him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Chloe. Run. But Ethan was a fashion designer, his hands accustomed to silk, shears, and delicate sketches. Marcus was a hardened, brutal criminal who had spent the last decade surviving in the harshest prisons. Within seconds, Marcus regained his footing. He grabbed Ethan by the collar of his expensive wetsuit and slammed his fist repeatedly into Ethan's face. The sickening sound of flesh meeting bone echoed through the hall. Ethan groaned, blood spurting from his nose and lip, but he still tried to claw at Marcus's arms. You little insect, Marcus spat, kicking Ethan hard in the ribs. Ethan curled into a ball on the floor, gasping for air, his ribs cracking under the force of the blow. Ethan, Amber shouted from the side, watching the violence with a twisted grin. Dad, don't kill him yet. Let him watch. While they were distracted by the brutal beating, I didn't waste a single second. As a private investigator, I had trained my body to react under extreme pressure, even when my mind was screaming in terror. The moment Ethan had tackled Marcus, my fingers had gone to work behind my back. The knot tying my wrists was indeed my own invention. It was a complex interlocking knot designed to look completely secure while holding a hidden slip anchor. With my hands shaking and slick with sweat, I meticulously traced the coarse fibers of the rope. Slide the left loop. Twist the inner core. Pull. The coarse rope loosened. With a silent gasp, I slipped my wrists free. I didn't immediately stand up. I kept my hands behind my back, waiting for the right moment. I watched as Marcus kicked Ethan one last time, leaving him semi-conscious and bleeding on the floor. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead, his breathing heavy as he turned back to me, the switchblade glinting in his hand. Now, where were we, baby? Marcus sneered, stepping closer. Let's get you out of that dress. He lunged forward, reaching for my shoulders. I didn't flinch. The moment his hands touched my collar, I brought my hands forward, grabbing the heavy brass candelabra that was sitting on the small prop table next to my chair. With every ounce of strength left in my battered body, I swung the heavy metal object directly into the side of Marcus's head. Crack. Marcus let out a guttural roar of pain as the brass struck his temple. He stumbled backward, blood instantly pouring from a deep gash on his forehead. He clutched his face, his eyes wide with shock and fury. You bitch, he screamed, lunging at me again. I threw the chair at him, forcing him to dodge, and scrambled backward toward the edge of the stage. But my body was weak from the miscarriage and my legs buckled beneath me. I fell to the floor, my hands scraping against the rough wooden planks. Marcus recovered quickly. He towered over me, his face covered in blood, looking like a literal demon. He raised the switchblade, his eyes filled with murderous intent. I'm going to carve that pretty face of yours into pieces. Dad, watch out, Amber suddenly shrieked. Before Marcus could bring the knife down, the heavy oak doors of the estate were blown completely off their hinges. A flashbang grenade bounced across the floor, detonating with a blinding light. And a deafening boom. Police. Nobody move. Drop your weapons. Armed tactical officers poured into the hall like a black wave, their laser sights painting the walls and the suspects. Leading the charge was a man with graying hair and a face etched with a lifetime of grim determination. My father, Arthur. Hands in the air. Now. Arthur roared, his service weapon pointed directly at Marcus's chest. Marcus, realizing he was completely outmatched, slowly raised his hands, dropping the switchblade onto the floor with a dull clatter. 2 officers immediately tackled him to the ground, forcing his face into the dirt and ratcheting handcuffs tightly around his wrists. Amber tried to slip out through the back door of the stage, but 2 officers blocked her path, pinning her against the wall. Let go of me. I didn't do anything. I'm a student, she screamed, her sweet voice turning into a piercing shriek as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Ethan, tell them I was just doing a project. But Ethan couldn't answer. He lay on the floor, bleeding, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as the reality of his ruin washed over him. Arthur ran past the officers, dropping to his knees beside me. He threw his jacket over my shivering shoulders and pulled me into a tight, protective embrace. Chloe, oh God, Chloe. I'm so sorry. I'm here. You're safe. I've got you, my father whispered, his voice cracking with a rare display of emotion. He held me so tightly I could hear the rapid, terrified beating of his heart. For the first time that night, a single, cold tear slipped down my cheek. I leaned into my father's chest, my body finally letting go of the tension that had kept me upright. I'm okay, Dad, I whispered. I'm okay. The estate hall was suddenly filled with the chaotic flurry of emergency personnel. Red and blue lights flashed against the high stained glass windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the ruined wedding decorations. Paramedics rushed in with stretchers. One team immediately began treating Marcus's head wound, while another knelt beside Ethan. Ethan refused to let them touch him. His eyes were locked on me as my father helped me stand up. Chloe, Ethan choked out, pushing the paramedic's hands away. He dragged his battered, broken body across the floor toward me, leaving a smear of blood on the polished wood. Chloe, please look at me. Please. I stopped. My father paused beside me, his hand resting protectively on his holster, his eyes glaring down at Ethan with pure, unadulterated disgust. Ethan reached out, his trembling, blood-stained fingers barely brushing the hem of my coat. The same hands that had once sketched beautiful gowns, the same hands that had cooked my favorite meals, were now trembling like dry leaves in the wind. I didn't know. Ethan wept, his voice a pathetic, broken sob. I swear to you, Chloe, I didn't know about Marcus. I didn't know about the baby. I thought you were just angry about the wedding being postponed. I thought Amber was innocent. Please, you have to believe me. I would never have let them hurt you if I knew. I looked down at him. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. That's the problem, Ethan, I said softly, my voice devoid of anger, carrying only a profound, chilling emptiness. You didn't know, because you stopped looking at me a long time ago. Ethan flinched as if I had struck him. You didn't know I was pregnant because you were too busy taking care of Amber's fever. You didn't know I was traumatized because you were too busy recording my pain for her thesis. You didn't even care enough to ask why I was in the ER. You just assumed I was being immature. Chloe, I'm sorry. I'll fix this, he begged, his tears mixing with the blood on his face. I'll make it up to you. We can still get married. I'll design a new dress. We can go away far from here. We can start over. We can try for another baby. Please don't leave me. Hearing him mention another baby made something inside me turn completely cold. The boy who saved me in that freezer 10 years ago died a long time ago, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but cutting through the noise of the room like a razor blade. He was brave. He was selfless. He would have died to protect me. But you are just a stranger who looks like him. A stranger who helped my torturer drag me back to hell. I stepped back, pulling my coat away from his reach. Don't ever speak to me again, Ethan.
No.
Chloe, please. Ethan screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed off the high ceilings. He tried to stand, but his cracked ribs gave out, and he collapsed back onto the floor, weeping hysterically as the paramedics finally forced him onto a stretcher. Arthur looked down at him one last time. Your father's domestic abuse files are on the floor, Ethan, Arthur said.
Coldly.
Read them. Know that your mother loved you, but she couldn't survive your father. And know that I spent 10 years keeping that secret to protect your
sanity.
But you weren't even worth her memory. With that, my father guided me out of the hall, leaving Ethan alone in the flashing red and blue lights, surrounded by the ruins of the wedding that would never happen. 1 month later, the morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment, casting a warm, golden glow over the boxes stacked neatly against the
wall.
It was a small, cozy place in a quiet part of the city, far away from the coastal estate and the memories of the past. I sat at the kitchen counter, sipping a warm cup of tea. My body had healed, though the faint physical scars on my face and wrists remained. The emotional scars would take much longer to fade, but for the first time in 10 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. My father walked in, carrying a fresh bag of pastries from the bakery. Downstairs, he looked lighter, the heavy burden of the past decade finally lifted from his shoulders. How are you feeling today, kiddo? He asked gently, setting the bag on the
counter.
I'm good, Dad. I smiled, a genuine, quiet smile. Really? I slept through the night without any nightmares. Arthur let out a soft sigh of relief. He sat down opposite me and slid a newspaper across the counter. I thought you might want to see this. The final verdicts came down this morning. I looked at the headline. Prominent designer's career ruined as kidnapping conspiracy revealed. Accomplices sentenced. The article detailed the trial of Marcus and Amber. Marcus had been sentenced to life without parole for attempted kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy. Amber, despite her tears and pleas of being manipulated by her father, was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary for her active role in planning the torture and acting as an accessory. But it was the section on Ethan that caught my eye. While the prosecution couldn't prove Ethan had knowingly assisted in Marcus's escape or the actual attempted kidnapping, his involvement in the simulation video and his gross negligence had leaked to the public. The video of the simulation, the one where I was heat-stroked and begging while Ethan sipped champagne with Amber, had been leaked online by an anonymous source within his own crew. The public backlash had been swift and merciless. Within 48 hours of a leak, every major luxury brand had cut ties with Ethan's fashion house. His flagship stores were boycotted, his upcoming runway shows were canceled, and his investors pulled out, leaving him bankrupt. But the financial ruin was nothing compared to his mental state. According to the article, Ethan had suffered a complete psychological breakdown. He had been admitted to a private psychiatric facility, completely unresponsive to the outside world. Sources close to him said he spent his days in a stupor, clutching a torn, custom-made wedding dress, whispering apologies to a child who would never be born. I stared at his picture in the paper. He looked gaunt, hollow, and utterly broken. A year ago, I would have cried for him. I would have rushed to his side, desperate to heal his pain. But now, looking at his face, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just a clean, empty slate. He got what he deserved, Chloe, Arthur said softly, watching my reaction. He did. I agreed, folding the newspaper and sliding it into the recycling bin. But his story is over. Mine is just starting. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the bustling city.
Below.
The streets were filled with people heading to work, laughing, living their lives. I touched my stomach gently. The pain of the loss was still there, a quiet ache. That would always be a part of me. But it was no longer a weight that dragged me
down.
It was a reminder of what I had survived and how strong I truly was. I was Chloe. I was a survivor, a detective, and finally, a free woman. The phone on the counter buzzed. I walked over and picked it up.
It was a
message from my agency. A new client was looking for a top-tier investigator to solve a cold case. I smiled, a sharp, determined glint returning to my eyes. Dad, I said, grabbing my coat from the rack. I'm heading out. I've got a case to solve. Go get him, detective, Arthur smiled. I opened the door and stepped out into the warm, bright morning, leaving the shadows of the past behind me forever.